Good morning and welcome to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. It is Monday, January 29th at 10 a.m. and we are here this morning for an allowable ex parte communication briefing presented by the Conservation Voters of South Carolina. Let's take a roll call of commissioners. With us virtually we have Commissioner Irvin, present in the hearing room. We have Commissioner Justin Williams, Vice Chair Powers, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Carol Lee Williams, Commissioner Caston, and Chair Belser. Before we read the docket and go through preliminary matters, I apologize. We're having a little bit of technical some technical challenges this morning. I think we've got a workaround, but we'll see how we go. We may have to adjust as we go. Commissioner Irvin, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. I recognize our staff counsel, Mr. Winburn, to read the docket.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, commissioners, and to all who are present here today. Today is January 29th, 2024, and we are here in the Commission's hearing room pursuant to a notice of request for allowable ex parte communication briefing in 2023-88-E from Conservation Voters of South Carolina regarding battery storage. This matter has been noticed on the Commission's website as required by South Carolina Code annotated section 58-3-260C6. The subject matter notice to be discussed today relates to Conservation Voters of South Carolina's briefing on battery storage. I would remind everyone that this is a briefing and not a hearing. The briefing must be conducted in compliance with the provisions of South Carolina Code Section 58-3-260C, and the requirements of that statute are in part that an allowable ex parte briefing be confined to the subject matter which has been noticed. Therefore, I ask the presenters, commissioners, and staff to please refrain from discussing any matters not related to the specific topics. The statute prohibits any presenter, commissioners, or commission staff from requesting or giving any commitment, predetermination, or prediction regarding any action by any commissioner as to an ultimate issue which either is or is likely to come before the commission. I would also ask the presenters, staff, and commissioners to refrain from referencing any report, article, statute, or document of any kind that are not included in today's presentation. A copy of any document which is referenced during the briefing must be provided to the Office of Regulatory Staff for inclusion into the record, which will be certified by the Chief Clerk of the Commission, Ms. Jocelyn Boyd. If anyone during the course of this briefing exceeds the scope or does not comply with or fails to conduct themselves within the provisions of South Carolina Code Section 58-3-260 governing allowable ex parte briefings, it is expected that a contemporaneous objection will be made. And finally, everyone in attendance today must sign in or register. Everyone in the hearing room must read, sign, and return the form which you were given at the door, which includes instructions and the deadline for its return. It is required by law for each attendee to certify that the requirements contained in Section 58-3-260C have been complied with in this presentation. Thank you all for your time and attention. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Winburn. I would just like to reiterate that this is a briefing. It is not a hearing. Any questions pertaining to the briefing should just be for clarification of what is presented. The presenters are not subject to cross-examination, but they may get some questions to clarify. I also strongly urge that no one reference any documents that are not contained in the presentation. Otherwise, you're going to have to get a copy of it and submit it to ORS for inclusion in the record. Before we begin presentation, I want to take appearances and then I'll check with Mr. Torrey to see if there are any further instructions. Who's representing the Conservation Voters of South Carolina this morning?
Hi, good morning, Chair Belser. Court Walsh for Conservation Voters of South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. And ORS is here as the as a third-party neutral. Mr. Torrey?
That's correct, Madam Chair. Good morning.
And do you have any additional instructions to add to what Mr. Winburn or I have given?
I do not, Madam Chair. I think it's been thoroughly covered.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Walsh, we will turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Chair Belser. Vice Chair, Commissioners, good morning. Court Walsh again from Nelson Mullins, representing conservation voters of South Carolina. We're on our, what is now, I think, fourth or fifth presentation. I'm sure Jalen, my friend Jalen Brooks Nefley will remind me. But this morning you're going to hear from Aaron Schwartz, who comes to us, who's based in Boulder, Colorado. He's with the RMI group. Even though he has come to us from Colorado, he has connections. He was just telling me before that he was staying with some family in Rock Hill, so he's got some closer connections than you might otherwise know. But what I'll do is I will stop my kind of brief introduction. I'll let Ms. Brooks Nefley take over, give you a better introduction about Mr. Schwartz and what his presentation is going to involve today. Thanks.
Good morning. As Court said, my name is Jalen Brooks Nefley, and I'm an Energy Project Manager for Conservation Voters of South Carolina. We're really happy to be back at the PSC today, I believe for the 5th time. I want to thank you, Commissioners, for your time and attention this morning. I'd also like to thank the PSC staff and the ORS for your work in facilitating this briefing. I'm just going to give a brief introduction, and then I'll hand things over to our speaker, Aaron Schwartz. So we've had the opportunity to present several briefings at this commission in the past, all focused on how to improve our energy system in South Carolina. At CVSC, we advocate for a clean and equitable energy future for all South Carolinians, and we've been thankful for the opportunity to discuss this with the commission in the past. Today, we're going to talk about another innovative way to improve the reliability and control of the electric grid and make better use of variable renewable energy sources, and that is battery storage. Battery storage is a big business, and it's only expected to grow in the future. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, battery storage capacity in the U.S. has been growing since 2021 and could nearly double by the end of 2024. S&P predicts that 40 gigawatts of storage capacity will be added in the U.S. by the end of 2025. These battery projects are being deployed all over the country with components that are increasingly manufactured right here in South Carolina, thanks in part to new investment from the Inflation Reduction Act. The Inflation Reduction Act includes an investment tax credit for standalone battery storage regardless of what charges it, leading to major increases in the technology. It also includes a bonus for projects in frontline communities, such as neighborhoods around closed coal plant sites. As we see these battery projects grow, we can also see their benefits. For example, Hawaii recently replaced the capacity from its last remaining coal plant with a 158 megawatt battery storage project, providing much needed capacity to the island, drastically reducing renewable curtailment, and providing backup power in case of natural disaster. Another benefit is investment in local economies. For example, in 2023, the White House announced up to $325 million of investment in long-duration energy storage technologies, which will go to projects in several U.S. cities, including Denmark and Orangeburg, South Carolina. These projects will incorporate career training at local HBCUs and build the economies of these cities. Finally, batteries can be used as an alternative to transmission upgrades. Batteries can reduce the amount of costly new transmission lines that need to be built by managing the amount of power on the grid at a given time. All in all, battery storage has already changed the way utilities plan and operate their systems, and the trajectory is that this will only increase. We're excited to share more about this topic with you today. Here to tell us more about battery storage and the benefits it provides is Aaron Schwartz from RMI. Aaron researches clean and cost-effective energy portfolios at RMI, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that seeks a clean, affordable energy future globally. RMI works with businesses, policymakers, communities, and other organizations to seek market-based clean energy solutions with expertise in both technology and economics. Aaron holds a Bachelor of Science in Engineering from Princeton University and a Master's in Technology and Policy from MIT, where he worked on energy system modeling and researched the role natural gas can play in decarbonization in the American Southeast. He also has experience as a data analyst at a demand response aggregator and founder of a startup that develops off-grid renewable energy solutions for disaster relief and rural electrification. Today, Aaron will discuss battery storage and reliability. He'll cover battery market trends, the basics of battery storage operation, the resiliency and reliability of battery storage, and also some examples of battery storage systems being used in other states. And with that, I will pass things over to Aaron.
Well, thank you so much for those kind words and introduction, Jalen, and thank you so much to the Commission for hosting me today, as well as Conservation Voters of South Carolina for inviting me. My name is Aaron Schwartz, as Jalen mentioned, from RMI, formerly Rocky Mountain Institute, and it is my pleasure today to speak to the Commission about battery energy storage systems and reliability. RMI's mission is to transform the global energy system to secure a secure, clean, and prosperous zero-carbon future for all. We worked across several sector focus areas, including industry, mobility, buildings, and electricity, leveraging several market catalysts in our search for market-based solutions for the energy transition. We work also across several global geographies, including China, India, the United States, the Global South, and urban geographies. I specifically work on our electricity program, where we cover several areas relevant to utilities and electricity markets, including markets and grids, utility business models and regulation, grid resources, finance and policy, as well as global coal. As a member of our grid resources team, I work specifically on integrated resource planning in vertically integrated markets with a specific focus on reliability and resource adequacy, as well as grid modeling. So here's our agenda for today. I will share several emerging battery market trends and move to battery energy storage system, or BESS, basics. I'll cover the several elements of reliability that batteries can provide, including operational reliability, resource adequacy, and resilience. I'll share several examples from across the United States about how we are seeing batteries lower cost and increase reliability today, and we'll end with some concluding remarks. And throughout this presentation, there are 5 numbers that have really stood out to me that I think tell a powerful story about the role of battery storage that I hope you can remember once this presentation concludes. So let's begin with battery market trends, and I'll share the very first of those numbers, which is 100. The cost of the most common battery cell, increasingly found in stationary energy storage systems, has dropped below $100 per kilowatt hour for the first time last year. This is a number that many experts would have thought was impossible 10 years ago. And I think this really summarizes the dramatic cost declines that we've seen in lithium-ion battery storage over the past decades, dropping 99% since 1991. What's more, not only have costs declined, but the rate of cost declines has accelerated. If we look at the learning rate, this figure on the right, which represents cost declines seen when market size doubles, between 1991 and 2023, that learning rate was at 19%. But over more recent decades, 2003 to 2023, that learning rate has accelerated up to 29%. And the pace of these cost declines has consistently exceeded most expert forecasts. As we can see here, the red line showing those actual costs for battery cells being below all of these expert forecasts, with the exception of 2022 was an exceptional year as the battery storage market, as well as many other industries, recovered from some of the supply chain challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. What these forecasts continue to agree on, however, is that the costs of batteries are expected to continue to further drop. RMI analysis using the two learning rates, that 19 or more recent 29% learning rate, and assumptions about market size in the future, projects that battery cell costs will further drop to between $32 and $54 per kilowatt hour by 2030. I would like to just use this time to emphasize that lithium-ion batteries, although the market size is really exploding, is not a mysterious technology. And in fact, most of us probably carry around lithium-ion batteries in our pockets every day. This is just an example of what a battery cell looks like. This is a cylindrical version manufactured by Tesla. Really not much different looking than a AA battery, albeit a little bit larger. And this is the fundamental unit that we find inside of electric vehicles, inside of residential storage, and inside of utility scale storage. Hundreds or thousands of these individual battery cells wired together to provide greater amounts of energy depending on the application. And unsurprisingly, as the cost of this fundamental component, as battery cell costs have declined, so have the costs of grid-scale battery energy storage, or BESSs. If we look on the left, showing power capacity, we've seen record low power capacity in the latest available data from the EIA, which only spans till 2020, around $700 per kilowatt. We see consistent declines in the cost of energy capacity in dollars per kilowatt hour, dropping from $2,100 per kilowatt hour to slightly above $600 per kilowatt hour in 2020. As some of these previous figures have shown, however, the trends of cost declines have been quite dramatic. So it's useful to look at even more recent numbers. Fortunately, researchers at NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, have some more recent cost estimates, estimating a 2022 cost of $482 per kilowatt hour for a 4-hour battery installation. This includes all the installed capital cost of that battery. And this is in fact a conservative estimate to those of other expert market estimates. Here on the right-hand side, the green triangle, we see NREL's estimate, but we see that other leading forecasts put 2022 costs in some cases below $300 per kilowatt hour. The point is that costs have declined and are continuing to do so. These NREL researchers have developed forecasts for how these costs may continue to decline over the coming decades, ranging from 16 to 49% by 2030 and 28 to 77% cost declines by 2050. And these cost declines have contributed to a dramatic growth of grid-scale battery energy storage capacity. We saw about 50% year-over-year growth in Q3 2023, and these trends are expected to continue. This is the second number that I hope you can all remember, which is 2. The amount of battery storage in 2023 doubled the nation's installed capacity. As we can see on the right-hand side of this figure, most of those capacity additions are occurring in the wholesale markets, in ERCOT and CAISO, but this doesn't tell the full story. For that, it's useful to look at where installations are popping up across the country. And although we do see many larger projects occurring in CAISO and ERCOT, if we look at the map of the United States, it's hard to find a region where some projects, albeit many smaller scale, aren't emerging. This is a really exciting trend for me. Furthermore, new federal incentives have really enabled a shift in the economics of battery storage. The 2022 Inflation Reduction Act allowed standalone energy storage to qualify for the investment tax credit, or ITC. Previously, only energy storage that was paired with solar resources and drew most of its energy through solar qualified. Now standalone solar qualifies as well. The full tax credit, which we expect most developers to be able to claim by meeting domestic wage and apprenticeship requirement stands at 30%, but additional adders, which are stackable, allow developers to claim an ITC of up to 70%. So let's talk about some of the basics of battery energy storage. I seem to be having trouble with the clicker. Doesn't seem to be going forward. It went backwards. Oh. Okay, I think I might need to do a better job pointing, but excuse the delay.
You're fine. And
Thank
you're
you.
doing better than I would be able to do, Mr. Troy, so
Thank you. Energy storage provides nearly 24 applications to the electric power sector. This is the third number, 23. The authors of this wonderful research, which has been shared in the record, Monetizing Energy Storage, through which this figure was adapted, identify 23 applications of battery energy storage in the electric power sector. That includes across locations, including alongside generation, within the transmission and distribution networks, and behind the meters in industrial, residential, and commercial sites. Battery storage offers value through many types of economic value streams, including energy arbitrage, increased utilization of other resources on the grid, power reliability, as well as power quality. Battery storage has a close relationship with unlocking the value of variable renewables, such as wind and solar. So much so that the authors of this figure chose to specifically highlight whether these applications have a direct, indirect, or are unrelated to variable renewables. As we can see from this figure, the majority of these applications have a relationship to variable renewables. And we'll be talking a little bit more later on about battery storage plays a substantial role in really unlocking the economic potential and value, as well as the reliability potential of variable renewable resources. Speaking of these applications, in the United States, utility-scale battery storage is serving a growing set of roles. The most common of which is frequency regulation, followed by ramping or spinning reserves, energy arbitrage, load following, capturing excess wind and solar generation, and system peak shaving. And we'll be discussing a little bit more about these applications shortly. What I hope to convey here is that batteries don't just serve a single application. They can serve multiple applications at once. And many developers hope to monetize their applications through what's called value or revenue stacking, generating revenue streams by offering several of these services at the same time. So I'd like to align on some key design parameters for battery storage. Power capacity in megawatts or kilowatts is the nominal amount of power that can be discharged instantaneously by the battery. Energy capacity is the nominal amount of energy that can be stored by the battery. And when we divide energy capacity by power capacity, we get the discharge duration. And that is the time, usually in hours, that it would take to fully discharge the battery at its nominal power capacity. Cycle life represents the number of charge or discharge cycles before failure or warranty and degradation. Usually batteries have a limited number of cycle life before they reach their end of life. For lithium-ion batteries, that can range between 3,000 and 10,000, depending on the specific chemistry. Depth of discharge represents the percent of energy capacity that can be charged or discharged without severely degrading the battery's nominal energy capacity. For lithium-ion batteries, this is usually between 80 and 90% of its nominal power capacity. To discharge it below that, so the bottom 20 or 10% could risk damaging the battery, so operators usually will operate the battery within that discharge range. And finally is round-trip efficiency, which represents the ratio of energy charged versus discharged, accounting for losses from the control system and other electrical losses. Usually for lithium-ion batteries, this is around 85%. So if the battery charges 100 units, we would expect around 85 units of energy to come out of it. Next, I want to briefly touch on location. Batteries serve both behind-the-meter applications for residential, commercial, and industrial customers, as well as front-of-meter applications. Residential installations or behind-the-meter installations are often smaller than 1 megawatt. Front-of-meter can be greater than 1 megawatt, often much larger, even on the order of hundreds of megawatts, and we'll see some examples later of that. There are several different types of configurations for battery storage as well. The most straightforward being standalone storage, in which storage is developed independently of any other resource. There are also hybrid storage configurations, in which storage shares a point of interconnection, an inverter, and a control system with another resource, and this is operated as a single system. So from the perspective of the grid operator, they see a single resource which they can control. That's presented on the right in this figure. Storage can also be co-located with other resources, in which they share a point of interconnection, but are operated independently by the grid operator and are seen independently. One of the concepts that for a long time confused me about energy storage was this idea of duration. Specifically, thinking about if I have a battery and I choose to discharge it long enough, can't I really extend that duration to any amount of time? So what does a 4-hour battery really mean? I think it's useful to align on that. And so here I want to present two different ways that we can arrive at a so-called 4-hour battery. And for the purpose of this example, let's consider a battery that has a 60 megawatt power capacity. So on the left, we can have what is called a 4-hour battery, discharging at its full nominal power capacity at 60 megawatts. And what that means is that this battery can discharge at 60 megawatts continuously for 4 hours. Another way that we can get 4 hours of energy would be, for example, to take a single 2-hour battery and discharge it at 50% of its power capacity. This could give us 4 hours of energy, but if that's another 60 megawatt battery, it would be producing only 30 megawatts of power. So this really isn't an apples to apples comparison, because one battery would be discharging at 60 megawatts, the other battery would be discharging at 30 megawatts. So to make these apples to apples, let's take a second 2-hour battery and put this together with the first. This is what we see on the right. And we can take these two 2-hour batteries, we can discharge them at half their nominal power capacity, and now we have two 4-hour 60 megawatt batteries. However, this application on the right isn't desirable from an economic standpoint. We're paying for power capacity that we aren't using, that we don't need, because these are discharging at 30 megawatts while they're built to discharge at 60 megawatts. These numbers on the bottom, taken from NREL's annual technology baseline, demonstrate these economics. The 4-hour duration battery on the left costs about $1,800 per kilowatt, while when we take the two 2-hour duration batteries, that cost rises to over $2,100 per kilowatt. So it's important when we think about batteries that we are sizing them properly for the appropriate application. That extends not to just sizing batteries of a particular technology type or chemistry, but thinking about the right storage technology for different applications. The majority of this presentation discusses lithium-ion battery storage because that is the predominant battery chemistry today, but there are several other types of energy storage technologies that are on our grid today and may emerge in greater numbers in the grid in the future. As we can see, different types of technologies have different per unit costs for power and energy. So for example, we can see that pumped hydro has a very high specific cost per kilowatt for power, but low costs on an energy basis, so per kilowatt hour of energy. On the other extreme are supercapacitors, which can store energy but have very high energy costs but low power costs. In this stylized examples, batteries, here shown flow batteries and lithium-ion batteries, fall somewhere in the middle. When we take these different energy and power costs and compare them to batteries of a certain duration, here on the x-axis between 0.01 and 100 hours, we can see how different batteries are the most economical choices for applications at different durations. On the far left here, we see for very short duration applications, supercapacitors are the most economic choice, but as the duration increases, they become the most expensive. On the other extreme is pumped hydro, which is very expensive for an application that would require a short discharge duration, but becomes the most economical for long duration applications on the far right-hand side of the right-hand graph. Batteries here in red and yellow fall somewhere in between, and the average duration today for lithium-ion batteries is usually between 2 and 4 hours. Although as the economics improve, that is pushing the boundaries of economic durations for lithium-ion batteries. And we'll hear a lot about discussion of long-duration batteries or medium-duration batteries or short-duration batteries. And that references what the economic application of that battery is. So in theory, we can use any of these chemistries for any application, but the economics might not make sense, which is why it's useful to group them as such. A big factor that contributes to which battery technology fits the right application is the technology type. On this figure on the right, we have batteries which store energy in an electrochemical system, here in the red bubble. And as you can see on the y-axis, those durations can be sort of centered around 1 hour, but range sort of the higher end of that up to 1 day, and down to the sub-hour level. But as new technologies emerge, the durations are becoming increasingly long durations. And I'll speak later about just one example of a long duration energy chemistry for a battery that is emerging. Next, I think it's useful to look inside what a grid scale battery looks like and the different components that go into that. So,
Chair.
Vice Chair Powers.
Excuse me for interrupting, but on the last sheet, it talked on I think the third category. What is vanadium?
Vanadium is it's a metal that is used commonly in flow batteries. So vanadium ions are one of the main elements in commonly flow batteries. So we've already talked about the fundamental unit of energy storage, the battery cell. And for grid scale applications, that constitutes the lion's share of the costs. Cells are then aggregated into what's called modules, which are groups of cells wired together, and modules are further aggregated into packs. These battery packs include connectors, housing, and hardware and software called a battery management system that can monitor battery health, state of charge, and safety. Next are balance of system costs that include the enclosure, monitors and control, safety equipment, power conversion equipment such as the inverter, energy management system, help convert power coming from the battery to interconnect to the grid, and several soft costs, system integration, project development, distribution, and installation. This figure shows a single battery enclosure. These are often in shipping containers, but larger grid scale applications may have many such enclosures in a single battery storage installation. I'd like to conclude this section by discussing battery health and safety. The greatest risk with lithium-ion storage is called thermal runaway, in which a battery cell begins to heat up, and that can spread to other neighboring cells, which can lead to risk of fire. Although it is
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Caston.
Did you say thermal runaway or runway?
Excuse me, I did say runaway. I'm seeing on the slide that is a typo. I apologize.
Which is it?
Runaway.
Runaway.
Yes.
Thank you.
It is impossible to completely eliminate the risk of battery system fire, but we can manage it. And to date, battery energy storage systems do have a remarkable track record of safety. The next number I hope you can remember is 0. There have been 0 deaths to date in the United States resulting from battery energy storage system safety incidents. And what's more, fires associated with battery storage systems have been decreasing as a percentage of deployment. So although we've already talked about the exponential rise in battery storage deployment across the country, the number of safety events every year, which is has been 10 to 15 for the last several years, has remains quite steady, suggesting that operators and developers are learning how to operate these systems safely and design them safely. We're also learning more about the right practices to follow when a safety event does occur. Emerging best practice suggests that when a fire does occur, best practice is to contain the fire and let it burn its course, rather than attempting to suppress the fire. When these do occur, there is lots of black smoke that emerges, so there is a question of what is going into the air. Laboratory testing has been done on air quality for battery fires, which suggests that the toxicity is similar to those of plastic fires. So not something we want to be breathing. It's not something we hope to avoid, but we do have a frame of reference and do know how to manage these types of risks. Further, there are several codes and standards that help regulate battery storage, which are constantly evolving. And these includes codes from the National Fire Safety Association and underwriter laboratories, for example. I do think it is helpful to consider the risks of battery energy storage against those of other energy sources. We benefit from worldwide from having reliable, safe, and affordable electricity. But any source of energy production does have risks associated with it. Researchers from Oxford quantified the deaths associated from health and safety and accidents from various sources of energy, and we see that there is risk associated with all of them. Battery storage is not included as it is not a source of energy. It stores and then can discharge, but we would expect battery storage to be on the bottom along with wind, nuclear, and solar of this figure. And again, no energy source is 100% safe, but we can understand how to manage and mitigate safety events when they do occur. All right. So I'd like to move on to battery storage energy systems and reliability. Reliability is an umbrella term that has multiple elements. That can include transmission stability, distribution reliability, resource adequacy, operational reliability, and resilience. And batteries can contribute to reliability across several of these elements. For transmission stability, batteries can play a role for frequency and voltage regulation. Under resource adequacy, ensuring that we have enough power when we need it most. Batteries can help manage weather variability and load uncertainty. Operational reliability in shorter second to hour timescales. Batteries can contribute to operating reserves and bring much needed flexibility into the system. Batteries can also help us recover from events through their contributions to resilience, such as recovering from storms or extreme weather events, as well as other outages that might be caused by cyber or human-caused attacks on the grid. And these contributions to reliability occur at several different timescales. I like to think of separating both the operations timeframe and the planning timeframe. Operations timeframe spanning from sub-second to days, planning timeframe being on the order of months, years, or even decades. In the operations timeframe, batteries can contribute to system stability and frequency control on the order of milliseconds to minutes. They can also contribute reliability through real-time supply and demand balancing on the order of minutes to hours. Longer duration storage technologies can help provide seasonal energy adequacy. And finally, long-term resource adequacy as we plan for changing loads and a changing resource mix over the coming years and decades. So let's start at those lower timescales in operational reliability. And here, flexibility is the name of the game. Batteries are especially well suited to provide frequency regulation. And frequency regulation responds to second-by-second imbalances in supply and demand to maintain the grid's frequency at a steady 60 hertz. Because of their flexibility, batteries can respond in under a second to signals from the operator. They're very well suited to absorb and discharge, quickly absorb excess power and discharge that in order to precisely meet changes in load. And on the right-hand side is just a stylized example of how we see batteries well suited to meet these very rapid second or sub-second fluctuations in load to maintain a stable frequency. Operational data shows that the accuracy, precision, and speed of battery energy storage compared to other resources is really superior. On the upper left-hand side, we see in operational data from PJM how battery energy storage clearly tracks the desired response from the operator, while there are lags or some lack of precision from other resources. Flexibility and batteries' quick response time also makes them excellent resources to serve as operating reserves. Operating reserves allow grid operators to maintain reliability during unexpected contingencies, and these can include generator or transmission line outages, unanticipated deviations from forecasted load, or variable renewable output, for example. These are typically expected to provide services within 10 to 30 minutes, easily achievable for battery storage. Operating reserves, and specifically this second sub-bullet on the first master bullet here of unanticipated deviations between load or variable renewable output becomes increasingly important as we have more weather-dependent resources on the grid. A deviation from the forecast may not have mattered much when there were very small numbers of variable renewables, but the larger the magnitude of variable renewables on the grid means that any deviation in that forecast is going to be amplified when trying to ensure sufficient resources are available. Increasing penetrations of renewables introduce other operational and economic challenges. You may be familiar with this image, which is California's famous duck curve, because it looks kind of like a duck. California has seen a massive growth in solar adoption over the past decade, which has changed the net load shape. Net load being load minus the contributions of variable renewables like wind and solar, which has led to net load midday when it's sunniest to be near zero or even in some cases below zero, in which case renewables and cheap zero-cost variable energy needs to be curtailed. That has also led to a ramp in the afternoon, the steep ramping that we see on the right, and a shorter but peakier evening peak. Battery storage are able to support the economics of this changing load shape by preventing curtailments during day, as well as charging when energy is cheap and plentiful, and discharging when it is most valuable later in the evening to meet evening peaks. This is not a trend that we are just seeing in California anymore. I was personally surprised to see this trend already occurring in New England, not somewhere I traditionally associate with midday solar resources. However, the rapid expansion of distributed behind-the-meter solar in New England has led to a duck curve forming for metered electricity demand. So this is not just a trend that we're seeing in California anymore. This is something that we are seeing in New England and, in fact, nationwide, according to the Energy Information Agency. So we've talked about how batteries can serve an economic purpose in maximizing the economic potential of the grid by shifting energy that is plentiful and cheap during the day to when it is more valuable in the evening. But it also has desirable properties for that steep afternoon, early evening ramp that we've seen. Compared to fossil resources, which experience mechanical stress and can lead to increased forced outages, batteries are digitally controlled and don't experience that mechanical stress. Further, fossil units must be run at or above a minimum power output and are subject to unit commitment, which means that some resources need to be on operating at their minimum power output, even when they are not necessarily the most economical resource when there's plentiful, low-cost variable renewable energy available. They need to be ready to go for meeting the afternoon ramps. Batteries, on the other hand, are not subject to unit commitment, and so they can be rapidly dispatched, again, in fractions of a second. So now moving from the shorter operational time frame to the longer-term planning time frame to discuss resource adequacy. And to start this section, I would just like to align on some definitions. Resource adequacy means having enough resources in the bulk power system available to the system operator to meet future load while accounting for uncertainty in both generation and load. This definition coming from a wonderful report from Energy Systems Integration Group. But to put more simply, as I like to think about resource adequacy, it's having enough power or energy on the system when we need it most. Capacity credit is an important concept in resource adequacy, which represents the percentage of a resource's nameplate or nominal capacity that can be counted on to meet demand during these tightest grid conditions. Accredited capacity is simply a resource's capacity credit multiplied by its nameplate capacity. So it gives us a megawatt value of a resource that we can count upon when we need it most. Finally is ELCC, or effective load carrying capability. That is a type of capacity accreditation which relies on sophisticated probabilistic modeling across a wide range of potential grid conditions, which is seen growing adoption by utility planners. ELCC modeling looks at several potential futures, different combinations of plant outages, different loads, different weather conditions, to give us an expectation of how different resources might perform during those at-risk hours and to help us give us a capacity credit, an accredited capacity. Batteries can help ensure resource adequacy by serving as a peak capacity resource. And I think this visualization shows how batteries are able to do this. Batteries are able to shave the top off of evening peaks, creating a lower and flatter peak. A common property among resources, however, is as the amount of a certain type of resource comes online, its value towards resource adequacy decreases. This is called a saturation effect. The value of that one additional unit provides less value to resource adequacy. And we can sort of intuitively understand this by looking at the figure on the left, especially for battery storage. So as that evening, or whenever the peak is, as that peak becomes lower but flatter, it also becomes longer. And at a certain point, we can reach the duration limit of the battery. So if a 4-hour battery is only able to discharge at its nominal capacity for 4 hours, ultimately, if the peak becomes longer than that, then any additional unit isn't able to be as effective of providing capacity during that time. This helps emphasize the importance of longer duration batteries, which can bring greater resource adequacy benefits as we begin to have these longer or flatter peaks. This shows the marginal ELCC of 4-hour storage and 10-hour storage. This was from a study specifically for the California market. And we can see that the ELCC of 4-hour storage declines more rapidly than that of 10-hour storage. 10-hour storage, because it's able to provide its full capacity over a longer period of time, is better suited for those longer peaks. At a certain point, however, both of these storage technologies reach saturation, achieving similar but low capacity values. But it's important to keep in mind the scale on the bottom of this axis. These are gigawatts of power. This is far greater than what we see on the right-hand side installed in our grid today. So this is more of a longer-term consideration of reaching those saturation points. Longer duration, multi-day battery storage is on the horizon, and sooner than many might think. One leading developer of long-duration storage technology is called Form Energy, who is developing pilot projects with utilities across the country for their 100-hour iron-air battery. Minnesota regulators, for example, granted Xcel Energy approval to build a 10-megawatt iron-air battery at the site of a retiring coal plant and near one of the largest solar developments in the United States. So this is one of my favorite slides because this is where the magic really happens. Batteries and variable renewables contributions to resource adequacy grow when they are considered together. So on the left-hand side, we've already talked about this duck curve effect, where solar leads to lower net load during the day, and then a steeper afternoon-evening ramp, and a shorter but peakier peak. Storage, on the other hand, can shave off the top of peaks and flatten them out. When we put them together, we benefit from these really synergistic properties. We have shorter but steeper peaks, which means that storage can go further in its capabilities. So just to put some numbers to this, if we look at the ELCC of solar alone in this demonstrative example, it provides 5.2 gigawatts of capacity. If we look at the ELCC of storage by itself, it provides 8.3 gigawatts of capacity, accredited capacity, I should say. But when we consider them as a portfolio and compute what's called the portfolio ELCC, we get a portfolio accredited capacity of 15.2 gigawatts. And you'll notice that 15.2 is greater than the sum of the individual solar and 4-hour storage ELCCs, greater in this case by 1.7 gigawatts. This is what's called the diversity benefits, and is, I think, a really excellent example that shows how storage really is able to unlock the reliability, resource adequacy value, and firm up variable renewable energy resources. And this brings me to the final number that I hope you can remember, which is 50%. About 50% of planned installations, planned capacity additions between 2023 and 2024 are co-located installations. And we can see this on the right-hand side, specifically comparing standalone to solar plus battery storage, the first two columns to the right of the dotted line. The value of when we pair batteries and renewables is really incredible, and developers recognize this, which helps explain why around 50% of these planned installations of batteries are alongside other resources. Finally, I'd like to discuss resiliency. And here I just have one slide, but it is an important topic. Resiliency focuses on how a system anticipates, absorbs, adapts to, and recovers from extreme scenarios. And batteries are able to provide resilience benefits through on-site backup and black start capabilities. Batteries can replace backup generators, which are usually diesel, which can be a large capital investment and are ideally rarely used. Storage, on the other hand, is able to provide other services throughout the year. We've already talked about all those applications that service can provide, providing value even when the grid is functioning normally. Batteries can also be used as black start resources, being used after a blackout to bring other generation resources online again without fuel costs or emissions. Typically, diesel generators can be used as black start resources, but this is just as with on-site backup. Batteries are able to provide other services to the grid throughout the year, even when they're not being used for these specific resiliency applications. And this has specifically been highlighted by NERC and FERC after Winter Storm Elliott, who say, quote, "The readiness and availability of black start units is paramount to the reliability of the grid during extreme weather scenarios." Next are several examples of battery energy storage systems from across the country. And here I am looking forward to sharing examples from Hawaii, from Utah and Idaho in the West, from Vermont, from Virginia, as well as Florida. First, and Jalen has already talked a little about this really impressive new installation, the Kapolei Energy Storage in Hawaii. This is a really exciting battery. It is a 3.1 hour battery, 185 megawatts, and it just began operations just last month in December. This battery was specifically designed to replace the AES coal plant on Oahu, located close, only a mile away, which has retired, and this battery provides 17% of Oahu's peak capacity. It offers a wide variety of energy services, including replacement capacity for energy, replacement for the coal plant's energy and capacity, synthetic inertia, fast frequency response, and black start capabilities. This battery is expected to reduce renewables curtailment 69% in Hawaii and integrate 10% more utility scale renewables in its first 5 years, according to Hawaiian Electric. The developer of this battery, Plug Power, their CEO, has called this the world's most advanced battery. And reading about it, I feel like I must agree with him. It is a really an impressive piece of engineering. The next example is in Florida, and it is Florida Power and Light's. Yes.
Last slide.
Absolutely.
I just want to make sure I understood your point correctly. Is the battery in Hawaii, did it replace the retired coal plant's energy and generation capacity?
That's correct.
Okay. So same output, same efficiency. Are they equal?
From an energy, and the battery was designed to meet the grid service, the energy and capacity grid services of the coal plant. So the coal plant, for example, was a 180 megawatt coal plant. So the battery was designed specifically to provide as close to possible of those same services. That's right. So this is the world's largest powered co-located battery with solar. It is massive, 409 megawatts, 900 megawatt hours. And you can see in this image that really has, as far as the eye can see, are these containerized enclosures that house the battery components. This battery is expected to save customers more than $100 million and eliminate more than 1 million tons of CO2, benefiting from Florida's plentiful solar resources and being able to store them for use when the solar is not as abundantly available, such as in the evening.
Question?
Yes.
It says co-located. Where's the solar part?
It is located nearby, so it is in the same facility. It is not in this picture.
How close does it have to be considered co-located?
Generally, co-located means they share a point of interconnection. I'm not sure, there can be a range of what those distances look like, but the key here is that they plug into the grid at the same place.
Okay, thank you.
So these first two examples are really battery behemoths, really large-scale installations. But not all battery installations need to be gigantic to provide value. Dominion Energy has 3 battery pilot programs in Virginia. And in each of them, they are gaining operational experience with one of those different applications that we've talked about. The Scott Solar and Storage Facility is a 12 megawatt battery, which includes 3 independently operated 4-hour batteries with on-site solar. These are operated to store excess solar generation and discharge when load is high or solar generation is low. The Hanover County storage project is smaller, it's 2 megawatts. This is a standalone installation with 2-hour duration. And this is serving customers who, during high demand periods, can defer wholesale equipment upgrades. This is an application that I haven't really spoken much about earlier in the presentation, of batteries being able to defer often very costly distribution or transmission upgrades, serving as a non-wires alternative to those wired projects. Finally is the New Kent County storage. This is a 2 megawatt system, 2-hour duration battery, once again, alongside 20 megawatts of solar. And here, Dominion is gaining experience evaluating battery contributions to essential reliability services. For example, the frequency regulation that we've discussed earlier.
Another question.
Yes.
Are these utility projects that the utilities are paying for, or are these independent developer projects? Do you know? I'm just curious.
I don't want to speak improperly. I don't know whether these are Dominion did pay for these projects. I don't know if they are in an agreement such as like
Okay.
a PPA with a developer, or if they actually own the systems though.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
So for my last 2 examples, I would like to move from front of the meter to behind the meter. The 2030 Zero Outages Initiative by Green Mountain Power proposes bringing utility-owned batteries to all residential customers. The reason it's called the Zero Outages Initiative is because Green Mountain Power is really thinking about the resiliency benefits of battery storage. This plan is currently under review by the Vermont PUC, so it'll be interesting to see how this progresses. But in any case, GMP currently operates innovative customer-sited battery programs. They offer a Powerwall program in which customers lease 2 Tesla Powerwalls, one of which is seen in this image, for $55 a month, and agree to share storage with GMP during peak demand periods. This is what's called a virtual power plant, where utilities can aggregate, or their aggregator will work with a partner to aggregate contributions from distributed energy resources and operate them as a single unit. And here they're able to use this virtual power plant to reduce peak demand. They also have a BYOD, or Bring Your Own Device program, where customers can purchase their own battery and receive incentives depending on how much access they want to give the utility for use during system peaks. My final example comes from Rocky Mountain Power and their WattSmart program. RMP offers payment, much like Green Mountain Power, to participants, and currently have about 3,000 customers participating or planning to enroll. What I think is especially exciting about this program is that RMP is not just operating their virtual power plant for peak demand reduction, but also on a daily basis for frequency response. So RMP is gaining value from these batteries every single day by using them in these more operational applications for frequency response.
Chair Belser,
Commissioner Carolyn Williams?
thank you. So is that the battery in the kitchen?
This is actually an especially interesting example. I'm glad you asked. That is the battery. And this is a pilot project that Rocky Mountain Power did with a residential apartment developer. And in this apartment, every single apartment has one of these batteries inside of it, which Rocky Mountain Power can operate. So just a really cool case study. It's called the Solely Lofts.
Why is it installed in the apartment?
As opposed to other locations.
Right. Is it an urban location? There wasn't is there a preference for it to be indoors and climate controlled?
Yeah, I don't know specifically in this case. There are some who make an analogy like we don't think twice about having certain appliances in our home. We don't think twice about having our dishwasher or a refrigerator. And some imagine a future where we don't think twice about having a battery installed in our home.
Thank you.
Okay, I have just one more slide, which is my concluding remarks. So first is that grid scale battery energy storage is here and it's growing exponentially. I've shared that the battery installed capacity in just this past year has approximately doubled, and that the trend is continuing. This is sort of out of many parts of the country, out of the pilot phase, and we are gaining real operational experience today. Second is that batteries have demonstrated performance across many grid applications, which have benefited from batteries' unrivaled flexibility. Today we focused on reliability, but that is just a few of the 23 applications that batteries can provide. Duration also matters, and when thinking about batteries today and in the future, thinking about the right duration of storage for the right application. Next is that no battery, or for that matter, any grid resource, can be 100% safe, but batteries do have a strong track record of safety that is poised to get stronger. 5 is that batteries are exceptional resources for supporting operational reliability and are essential for unlocking the resource adequacy value of renewables. Then finally is that inspiration and experience is all around us, as we've seen from just a few examples from across the country. That concludes my remarks, and I'd like to thank the Commission for having me again, and especially on a Monday morning.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Carolyn Williams.
Thank you, Chair Belzer. That was powerful. It was intense. And so I'm going to go back over a few things and ask you to give me a second run at what a learning rate is. I think I hear those words paired together and I think one thing, but as I listen to you, I just didn't get it.
If you're referencing a slide, could you?
Yes, it's slide number 6.
This makes me realize how long this presentation is. Okay. There we are. So a learning rate represents the percentage decrease in cost for a doubling of the market size. And that's why it's useful to visualize here. This is like a logarithmic axis.
Right. I think I'm just having trouble with the terms.
No problem.
How they relate to the definition you gave us, but something we can learn.
Absolutely.
I do have more. If anybody else wants to jump in, okay. I'm on slide number 12. And my question was why, and I'm working on getting my my head back into this. So I think my question is, the range of cost declines that's predicted for 2030 is much lower, a tighter range, and a very varied range for the prediction for cost decline by 2050. And I'm thinking there are a lot of variables, and some of it is the farther out, the more unknown. But I wondered if you could elaborate on why the cost decline could be greater in more time.
So I'm not familiar with the specific methodology that the NREL researchers used, but I can comment on, just for example, in RMI study, how we got a range of those two numbers. I think that was in a previous slide. That maybe can be representative of how others are thinking about this. In the RMI study, for example, for one of the projections, we assumed the 19% learning rate, so looking at that longer window. The other one, we assumed the 29% learning rate, so assuming that more recent, more faster rate of learning. The other factor was just assumptions about the market size. And so there are these multiplier effects where the bigger the market gets, the more that efficiency increases, and that can ultimately bring down costs too. So those were the two main inputs there. I imagine NREL researchers do have a different methodology, but to your point, no one can predict the future, and so as we get further out, there is a wider range.
This is less from this particular slide, but in general, are you able to speak at all to the impact of the market versus the incentives that states and federal governments are offering? What thinking about these predictions and cost, did they assume a certain amount of federal or state incentives going forward, or is there something, is it all market driven? Again, we certainly don't have a crystal ball, and I know you, but you've thought a whole lot more about it, so.
Can we just talk about the effect of incentives generally so that we don't have to go searching for any kind of extra documentation?
Sure,
I mean,
and I didn't.
I know you didn't reference anything specific, but just I think what you're asking is how do incentives
impact what you've presented. And certainly the answer can be you haven't addressed it, and that's okay.
I think it is hard to disentangle the policies from the market because we are on such an aggressive trajectory. I did touch on the Inflation Reduction Act in a previous slide, and that has billions of dollars of incentives for example, domestic manufacturing. Many of the tax credit, for example, the domestic content adder requires certain percentages of components to come from domestically manufactured battery cells, domestic iron and steel. So there absolutely is an industrial policy component. I'm not sure and can't speak to specifically how that impacts, will impact prices, but there is benefits from having, for example, a more robust domestic supply chain, as well as other multiplier effects in the U.S. economy, including jobs and manufacturing from those incentives.
Let me try and ask it from a different perspective. How much is the market going to make a difference? Let's forget about incentives. How much of the market predicts some of what you've shared with us today?
So the market plays a huge role in what has driven these cost declines and is expected to continue to do so. That's more efficient processes, that's more efficient supply chains, that's just general learning. I think just an example to showcase this is that one of the reasons that lithium-ion batteries are so dominant right now is because they have this massive established base of expertise of supply chains. There are lots of battery chemistries that are under in various stages of research and development, but it is a tough. It is tough. I expect it to be tough to catch up to lithium-ion batteries because these sort of feedback loops are already being created. I'll point you to one of the resources that has already been shared, the RMI Exchange report, that specifically talks about these feedback loops between the market and demand and really being helping drive each other, lowering costs, increases demand, and so on.
Okay, I try to be a good student, and those 5 numbers, I totally missed 23. I have a note, but I didn't get it. So that is on slide number 17.
Yes. So this is 23 applications. This is according to these authors, so I would say that's give or take, depending on how we're categorizing some of these, but in this figure, and according to these authors, there are 23 applications for storage in the electric power sector.
Great. And on 19, when you talk about depth of discharge, is there any reason that there's a lot of discussion about getting to the maximum use. But is there any efficiency reason that you need to get to 80 to 90%, or is it more an impact of what's needed at the time, and you discharge 40% and then you start to charge back up again? Is there any?
Yeah, so to clarify that, batteries are often not going to be discharged even to the 80 or 90%. And for example, for the frequency regulation applications that I shared, these are very small changes in the battery state of charge. If an operator did want to fully discharge the battery, and in some applications they might, in order to maximize the economic value of the battery, we want to make sure it can last as long as it can. And so that's why we wouldn't want to discharge it below that recommended depth of discharge.
But if there's not a need, there's no life of the battery reason to go to hit that 80% mark, for example.
That's right. The operation will depend on the application, and there's no need there's no need to, for example, fully discharge the battery every time that we use it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And does that relate at all to round trip efficiency?
Round trip efficiency is more of a fundamental feature of the battery, in just that there are these losses. It does relate to it in the sense that it's if we were to operate it under that full charge or discharge, about 85% of the energy would be lost. Okay. But similarly, if we charge or discharge at smaller intervals, there are still going to be losses associated with that.
I found it interesting, the discussion about deaths and risk. And maybe, are there other risks that loss of value? And I'm realizing that's not in your presentation, and so I probably shouldn't say any more. Sorry, I had to just say it out loud before I realized, unless you recall something where you did talk about risk associated with value, and I guess I'm thinking about, there was burning, and that risk, and zero deaths, but what about value? I don't answer it if it's not there.
I went to look at the citation, and I don't think that's in scope with what's been shared already.
Great, thank you. I think that is almost it. What's synthetic inertia? I'm on page 51.
Yeah, so let me go through my long presentation once more.
Well, I'm going to ask you another one I remember I had that's on the way. I don't know that I've got the page number, but a flow battery.
Yeah, I think this was in the comparing the different chemistries. So flow batteries are just a different type of battery chemistry. Instead of solid anodes and cathodes, they use electrolyte solutions, so like a liquid solution.
Okay.
That one is positively charged, one is negatively charged, and they pass these across a membrane in which there's ion exchange. That's a different type of battery chemistry. These are typically more appropriate for longer duration applications. I think the constant theme is that lithium-ion battery storage costs have just been coming down so much that it is not necessarily clear whether another chemistry will necessarily be more economic when those durations are more needed for the grid. And I'm happy to go answer your next question as well, if that was
awesome. Please go ahead. And that was page 51.
Yeah. Great. So synthetic inertia is a topic that a lot of grid engineers are very excited about. Traditionally in the power system, we have thermal power plants with large spinning masses, these large rotating masses, and these provide a grid service called inertia. It means that it helps keep the grid frequency within the desired range as sort of a fundamental property of the mechanics of those systems. Inverter-based resources such as solar and wind for a long time have been what's called grid following, which means they check in on what the frequency of the grid is and match their operations to that. As more and more inverter-based resources come onto the grid and power plants with large rotating masses retire, that puts the system at risk for more rapid changes in the frequency because there's less of that inertia on the grid. Inverters themselves can be set up in a mode called grid forming mode, where they can synthetically provide inertia as a rotating mass might be. And this is something that's really a software configuration for how these inverters are programmed. There are some case studies, I believe, in Australia and Hawaii for this this synthetic inertia feature, and is one of the advanced features. It's not something I went into detail in the presentation, but is maybe increasingly important for grids with high amounts of inverter-based resources.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
Commissioner Caston?
Thank you. And I want to make sure I stay within the confines of your presentation. Also, thinking in terms of the raw materials, lithium, and so forth. On slide 44, that long duration battery, the iron air battery, which, I've heard discussed in the past, and it does say it's a pilot program. Do you, is there, if I'm not supposed to ask this, stop me. How far along are these? Do we know as far as the iron air technology?
This is a technology that has been around for some time.
Mm-hmm.
Until recently, there haven't really been these long duration applications for storage. So there really hasn't been an incentive to deploy them. But as states or regions are adopting greater shares of variable renewables that we want to capture for a longer period of times, now there's more of an economic and incentive and utility interest in these technologies. I don't believe one of these Forma Energy iron air batteries are currently operational, but they are under construction at the utility scale. So the technology isn't new. It's more of an economic case for why there is now renewed interest in this technology.
Bigger, heavier, and the raw materials are everywhere.
Iron is incredibly abundant. That's right.
And with the lithium, I'm assuming that is the same situation. As far as the raw materials, who controls that and such.
It is an important consideration. Currently not in scope in the presentation.
Got it. Never mind. Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation.
Commissioners? Mr. Schwartz, Ms. Brooks-Kneffley, Mr. Walsh, thank you for being here today and sharing this information with us. Your knowledge and your enthusiasm are much appreciated. Thank you very much. And Mr. Torrey, is there anything else as the neutral that we need to be aware of?
Nothing further, Madam Chair. Thank
I
you.
would ask that you and Mr. Walsh and get with Mr. Winburn here, and let's just make sure we got all the bases covered,
Yes, ma'am.
if you would. So, again, thank you very much for your presentations today and sharing this information, and with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.